Hey there. It's WellDoneGavin, looking absolutely chopped and cooked. Just did my skincare routine, just took a shower. Hair is disgusting. Had to take my contacts out. Um, and that's how I'm going to begin this video. A couple months ago, I had the idea to watch every single Wuthering Heights adaptation, and then I would kind of just do a comparison, and I would end with it, and I would end the video talking about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. There was a couple of issues with that. It took me a lot longer to read the book due to just the holidays, and yeah, I'm not good at time management. So then the movie was coming out, and I thought, okay, well, I'll watch the movie, and then I'll compare it to like one or two Wuthering Heights adaptations. And then I watched Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights, and I thought it was really bad. I thought it was possibly one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I don't want to think about this movie longer than I have to. I don't want to put something out uh, I don't want to delay this video any longer because the cultural impact of this movie is short lived. No one's going to be talking about this in a year. So I want to get something out quickly and I want to do maybe shorter videos. Today I'm just going to be talking about the sex scenes and general smut of Wuthering Heights, and I'm going to compare it to Heated Rivalry. Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights only covers the first half of the novel, and that is the tragic love story between Catherine and Heathcliff. So Catherine's living at Wuthering Heights, and one day her father, who's just kind of a drunk, messy person, brings home a boy and gives him to her, and she names him Heathcliff. She tries to teach him how to read. She fails at that, and kind of just gets. Catherine tries to teach him to read. She doesn't do a good job, and she gives up. Basically, they grow up in an abusive household, so they kind of trauma bond to each other, and they form this connection that they need to survive. They grow up, and then they are suddenly played by Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, and they are still living on the Wuthering Heights. Their father is still very mean to them, and that's kind of it for the next part of this movie. And then the Lintons move in. The Lintons in the book have so much more going on, but in the movie, they're just kind of rich and they're just kind of new, and Catherine kind of wants to meet them. She meets them, she becomes well acquainted with them, and some time passes, and then Edgar Linton proposes marriage. Catherine kind of considers it. She's talking to Nellie. Nellie is her servant. Nellie hates her, and she hates Heathcliff, so she kind of pits them against each other and creates one of the best, probably most famous interpretations of miscommunication ever in the literary world, probably. And then Heathcliff overhears her complaining about Heathcliff, so Heathcliff runs away. She gets married to Linton's, and they kind of live an okay life until Heathcliff comes back. And then when Heathcliff comes back, they begin an affair. Her dad dies, and then she dies of sadness after Edgar Linton forbids her from seeing him. Which, like, totally Edgar Linton, justice for Edgar in this movie. They really did that character dirty. Um, I We're not talking about the book. In an interview, Emerald Fennell stated that she wanted to make the Wuthering Heights that she thought she was reading at 14. So she wanted to add in all the sex that she was kind of implicitly reading. She wanted to add in all the sex that she thought was like implied off screen. And she wanted to make it more like a romance between Catherine and Heathcliff. Obviously, the novel way more complicated than that, and but it's not that complicated that like a 14-year-old wouldn't get it. I'm not here to judge her. I am here to judge her a little bit. So the first sex scene that I want to talk about is actually not between Heathcliff and Catherine. It is between their servants. So Heathcliff lives in like the barn. He lives in like the upstairs of the barn. So Catherine comes up to get him, and as she's up there, two of her servants, Joseph and Zyla, they engage in like a BDSM scene. Obviously, it's not really BDSM. There's no safe words. There's no established um, dynamics, and this is just supposed to be very like provocative. And Catherine like sees this, and she's about to like make a noise, and then Heathcliff, Jacob Lordy, comes up behind her and like covers her mouth, and I think like covers her eyes, but I think she moves his hand off her eyes so she can like watch this. But she's watching it through the floorboards. So we do not see this scene, right, at all. We hear the noises. We really just watch Heathcliff and Catherine like react to this scene. Super underwhelming, like in my opinion, especially compared to Saltburn. Saltburn, there's a lot of like provocative imagery, and I have my own criticisms of that. But it is like shocking, or it is visually interesting to look at. There's nothing super interesting about this scene. I don't hate this scene. Obviously, it is kind of tense and it is sexual to sort of watch this awakening, I guess, to BDSM. And like Catherine and Heathcliff don't have the language to describe what they're seeing. So that's an interesting dynamic. This goes nowhere. Interesting idea to have Catherine and Heathcliff like drawn together in a like BDSM relationship that they don't understand, or that they don't have the language to interpret and like tell other people about. This doesn't get explored. Like they don't actually engage in like a BDSM relationship. We'll get to that a little bit later. The next scene happens shortly after. The next morning, Catherine is very bothered. Catherine is kind of aroused by the scene that she witnessed, and it's hard for her to like talk to Zilla the next day and like interact with anyone else. So Catherine runs off to a cliff. She starts to pleasure herself, and then Heathcliff finds her. I have a big problem with like this cliff that they keep going back to. I don't know where it is in relationship to the house. I have no idea if it's easy to get to. It really bothers me. So Heathcliff like sees her. They say they have a little bit of a fight. She's very embarrassed by it, and he licks her fingers and sticks them in his mouth. We've all been there. Hey, no judgment. All God's children. So finally the last scenes I want to talk about are a montage between Heathcliff and Catherine, and that's really all that it is. After her father dies, Catherine and Heathcliff's affair really begins in earnest. A lot of the montage is them like pre or post sex. It's a lot of them. There's one scene where they're hooking up in a carriage. There's one scene where they're hooking up at the Heights. There's another scene where they're hooking up at the Linton's house, and it's them sneaking around. Right? It's implied to be them sneaking around. I guess my problem really with this scene is by having this montage, there's no tension. And this is sort of my biggest issue with the smut in this movie is there's no tension. It's not actually difficult for them to have sex or to really express themselves sexually, right? There's nothing earned, right? By having them have this long kind of montage, it makes the affair seem very easy and very natural to them. And, obviously, 14-year-old Emerald Fennell thought that they were soulmates. There's a whole discourse about that, about whether or not she really likes him or Edgar more. I can't really get into that in this video. But what I can say is that it makes for very boring, like, sex scenes, right? They keep coming back to, like, this idea of tension. And so what do I mean? Well, like, I think I want to see more of, like, what their life is outside of the sex so that I can see why the sex means so much to them. If we have this montage, we just see that they're sneaking around, they're having sex. But like, if we see too much of them sneaking around, we just start to think, oh, it's really easy for them to have this affair. And then the other major issue with this is so Catherine is already pregnant with Edgar Linton's child. It's implied to be a son in the book, it's a daughter. I don't want to talk about that change. Right. So with Catherine being pregnant already, she can't get pregnant again by Heathcliff. So that just removes another element of like the tension and like the stakes of these scenes, right? Because Linton is gone for all these like montages, we have no idea how close they are to like actually getting caught. There's nothing really sexy about them. And like this is really baffling to me because Saltburn does have this tension, right? If you remember from Saltburn, the vampire scene, as some people called it, where Oliver and Venetia are outside and he eats her out on her period, right? They're doing it under the windowsill of Jacob Elordi's character. They can get caught and they do get caught, and then they have repercussions, right? Because of that, Oliver chooses to side with Felix and he kind of cuts out Venetia, and Venetia is very like jaded about it, right? And so that is a repercussion to their sex scenes, right? when he is eating out of the drain, this is right after Felix left the room. So, he doesn't get caught, but we know where Felix is in relationship to this scene happening. We have no idea where the other characters are during these montages. We have no idea if they suspect anything, and they do suspect things. We learn that after the montage. It's just very bizarre, and like, as much as I don't like Emerald Fennell, she's better than this. Also, at the end of this montage, um, Heathcliff overhears Edgar Linton and Catherine talking about their child. And then in the next scene, Heathcliff sneaks into her house and is like just talking about them having sex and whether or not the kid is his. And then he like tries to eat her out, and there's just no. Where is Edgar Linton in this? Why is my man not home with his beautiful wife? Finally, there's Isabella Linton. So in this movie, Isabella actually isn't related to Edgar. In the book, they're siblings, so I'm just interpreting them as siblings. Isabella Linton has a crush on Heathcliff, right? And so Catherine is kind of teasing her about this. Catherine is very possessive of Heathcliff, so she embarrasses Isabella in front of Heathcliff. And for a while, Heathcliff and Isabella do not have a scene together until they have sex. After Catherine breaks off their affair, Heathcliff sneaks into Isabella's room. Isabella is still living with them. It's not really explained why. And Isabella's super into him. Isabella is like starstruck. And he tells her, I'm only going to do this because I want revenge for Catherine. I'm going to take your virginity, and then we're going to get married, and you are going to help me drive Catherine mad. And Isabella says yes to this, right? Yes to every step. Heathcliff is literally giving her like consent checks, and Isabella is being like, yep, totally into you using me for revenge sex, totally into getting back at Catherine. I'm all yours, baby. The next scene, they get married at a courthouse. He doesn't kiss her, which I actually honestly was probably the most shocking scene for me. Like, I just thought that was so rude of Emerald Fennell to put that in there. Like, yeah, like Emerald Fennell can put good scenes in these movies. Edgar Linton sends Nellie, their servant, to check up on Heathcliff and Isabella. Nellie goes into their like foyer, and Heathcliff has Isabella on a leash. So they are engaged in like a pet play kind of relationship. At one point, Isabella like winks at Nellie as if to imply that like this is where she wants to be. She's fully aware that this is a terrible situation for her, and she's just like, "I'm good. It's Jacob Elordi." Nellie tries to get her to leave, and like Isabella behaves like a dog and like won't leave their master. Um, Again, I cannot stress this enough. In the book, Heathcliff kills her dog, so it's just it's so weird to see this on screen. And I know I wouldn't. I know I said I wouldn't talk about the novel, but I generally cannot believe I saw that. If I had to summarize my like biggest problems with Emerald Fennell's sex scenes, I would say there's obviously no tension. There's no lead up to like explain how the scene came to be. There's no lead up to, especially in like an affair. There is no tension in how they are meeting. There is no like explanation for where other characters are in relationship to their scenes. There's no like reason. Having it in a montage really defeats the purpose of like having an affair kind of movie. Um, I guess the other thing that I also want to touch on is like the sex scenes also have nothing to do with the characters, right? Like Heathcliff and Catherine see this BDSM scene as, I don't know. Heathcliff and Catherine have this unspoken thing where they witness this BDSM scene, and they do not engage in like BDSM sex. Now, I'm not saying I need to see the whole thing, and I don't need to see them. I don't need to see them go through the whole like figuring that out. But like their sex scenes have nothing to do with what their characters are, and it doesn't really reveal their relationships to each other. Like they're just having pretty standard vanilla sex. We don't get like any idea of like which one thinks they're better than the other one, right? There's no maneuvering. There's no like awkward like pre-dialogue like describing like what they maybe want. There's nothing like there's nothing we haven't seen before. And honestly, it feels very male directory to just have these awkward sex scenes where there's no lead up and it's just kind of implied and the guy's just on top and the guy's just doing his thing. I feel comfortable talking about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights in comparison to Heated Rivalry for a couple reasons. Like, namely because Emerald Fennell brought it on herself by saying she wanted to make like the fan fiction version of Wuthering Heights. And Heated Rivalry is fan fiction, right? I think it actually started as like a Steve Rogers, Bucky Barnes fan fiction, or at least I think Scott and Kip did. And then it kind of spiraled from there, right? So then it became this old story. Now, obviously, Heated Rivalry, the books are labeled as smut. They are explicitly romance novels. Wuthering Heights is not. So there's obviously more material for the Heated Rivalry team to work with. That being said, Heated Rivalry pretty much answers every problem I have with Wuthering Heights. So like the sex scenes have clear tension, and there's also quite a lot of characterization that goes into each scene. If you've been living under a rock, Heated Rivalry is a hockey show about Canadians Shane Hollander and Russia's Ilya Rozanov. Right? They are 1 and 2 draft picks for the fictional MHL, which is obviously a parody of the NHL. They have sort of a media rivalry where the media is like constantly pitting these two guys against each other. But they both have a secret. They are both gay, or in the case of Ilya, he is bisexual. Um, right, and so very early on in their rookie season, actually before the rookie season, they have this sort of what they think is going to be like a one-time fling, and then they can't get enough of each other, right? And so you can see the dynamic is they're having like an affair with their, but like the affair is their like public personas. Their public personas hate each other, but in their private life they love each other, or at least that is like their arc. And so you have this tension of like their very public life and then their personal life that they can only share with each other. And these moments bleed into their private life. The first time they hook up before the rookie season, Shane is super nervous. He's never been with a guy before. He literally like considers dressing up and like wearing a suit. And then even when he is like hooking up with him, he like folds his clothes nicely on the bed, right? Like there is characterization that's like going on to describe these dynamics. Meanwhile, Ilya has a little bit of experience with men, so he is much more like assured. He's much more in charge of the situation, and that's not even just because he's a top. He just understands how this works, and because he understands how it works, he has this like preconceived idea, and then it makes it more interesting when he actually accidentally like falls in love with Shane, right? Like that, like, do you understand why it works? Like even I can see why it works. Another sex scene where Ilya wins pretty much the Stanley Cup. I have no idea what they call it in the show. There's barely any hockey in this show, to be honest. um, and then like they're hooking up at like a hotel, and he is very like domineering to Shane. He's telling Shane to like strip for him and like show off like his dick and balls. Right? So you have this change in their dynamic, right? Before Shane was a lot better, but now Ilya has like the upper hand by winning the cup. And so their sex scene is like a little bit different than how it normally is. And they're both super into that, right? Episode 2 of Heated Rivalry also has a montage of sex scenes. And this is significantly better than the montage in Wuthering Heights. For one thing, we have a clear timeline of when these sex scenes are happening. In the MHL, it's kind of established that because they're rival teams, they play each other about 6 times, like 3 at home for each team. So when we see these scenes, we know, oh, okay, like there's been some time in between because of the regular season, when they're hooking up, and then it like cuts to it, right? There are time cards to tell you like what's happening, like 6 months later, 2011, 2012, stuff like that. So we understand that, like, yeah, this affair is covering multiple years, but because it's covering multiple years, they're only seeing each other about 6 times in that year. So like we're not actually missing that much, right? We have a clear understanding of where these characters are when they're not hooking up. Compare that to Wuthering Heights, where It could be like a week, it could be a month. Like all we know is Catherine is pregnant and she's not showing before or after the affair. So it's probably a short time, and at which case, why should I care? Meanwhile, these guys are having an affair for like 4 years. That's really interesting, right? I keep using the word like affair with Shane and Ilya, and that's definitely like a gross simplification. But like they're sneaking around is what I'm getting at, right? They obviously have a lot to lose if their secret comes out. Shane is under a lot of pressure by his managing parents and also being one of the only Asian Canadian players on the league. Ilya is Russian. It is illegal to be gay in Russia, right? So they have clear reasons to not let this secret out. They have a clear tension that they can finally like blow off when they're together. Pun not intended. Obviously, like in America, we are super weird about sex. Puritan culture has spread across this country, is in our foundation. And so that leads into like how our society depicts sex. Early Hollywood, a lot of rules about depicting sex. They had to get very creative to get around that. And so Heated Rivalry shows quite a lot more than what we're used to. And of course, these are gay men. So we are seeing something that we never really see before, right? And if there is gay relationships, it's very much implied. Like think Modern Family, think Bros, where there's not really like sex scenes, but like maybe they kiss every once in a while, maybe they're very affectionate, and maybe they talk about sex, right? But like this is interesting that like this is what we're seeing, and we're seeing so much of it. And now like can you really push the boundaries if you're just using heterosexual sex? I think you still can, right? There are still movies that have like pushed the boundaries of heterosexual sex. Think about Secretary with Maggie Gyllenhaal, My Love, My Light, right? She is in this dynamic where her boss is both very domineering in their professional setting, but then also is like their dom in their personal lives. And she does all these humiliation tests and she finds like an empowerment and an enjoyment in that. That is something like that Emerald Fennell could have explored, but she like didn't. And I think she didn't because she doesn't understand BDSM. I think there is still room for film and media to push the boundaries of what you can show with heterosexual sex. Certainly, like to be honest, in the media I've consumed, and maybe this is on me, I have not seen a lot of consent checks. And so for me to see this wasted on Isabella Linton's relationship with Heathcliff, I think that's a really missed opportunity. I think it should have been Heathcliff and Catherine sort of beginning their affair and really showing how like they're into each other, not just on a sexual like understanding, but also like metaphysical, spiritual, like into each other. Is there even room for sex in Wuthering Heights? I think it's debatable. I think you could. I think if you're gonna make a modern one, yeah, there's probably should be like a scene or two. That's not like the point of Wuthering Heights. Like Wuthering Heights is like closer to like Gone Girl, where they're both just kind of like fucked up codependent people that are in this relationship, and they're just kind of bringing out the worst in each other, and they're bringing everyone else down with them. I like don't hate the idea that like they have this unspeakable thing that maybe is like really gross to Victorian England, but like something that they feel empowered by, and so they feel like a deep shame, and they can't like be with each other over that. But that doesn't happen in the book. They don't have those scenes together. They don't. I'm sorry, that doesn't happen in the movie, right? They don't have these scenes where they're like ashamed of like the sex they're having, right? They're just ashamed of it because they're having an affair and she'll lose her money if they get caught. There's no tension that really pulls us apart from like other movies, right? Like I can think of, because I'm a pervert, I can think of way sexier and freakier movies. I'm not going to name them here, but I've definitely seen them. I think there's like, and I think there was also like clear ways for her to fix these problems. I, you know, like funnily enough, I think if she had less sex scenes and she focused on making like really good transformative ones, I think that would really help this movie. I think if they engaged more in BDSM, that would be an interesting idea. I think if they did anything interesting in their scenes together, that would really help this movie. Because at the end of the day, their relationship just kind of sucks. It's not interesting. It sucks the life out of the movie. Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie, some of the most attractive people on this planet, are just not sexy in this movie, and that sucks. Compare that to two guys I've never heard of before, Connor Storrie and Hudson Williams, and they have an unbelievably like sexy show. Even the women that they're not into are sexy, right? Like, I don't know where I was going with this video. I guess I had this idea in my head, and I really wanted to talk about it, and I had nowhere else to do it. So I just put it online like a freaky person. Now all my friends can say to me, "Hey, remember that time you talked about sex scenes for like 20 minutes?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I do." And that's online forever. If you like this video, you can like and subscribe. And also, I try and watch new movies like once or twice a week. And I write movie reviews for a website called Peloplat. I've linked it in the description of this video below. I love movies. I love consuming media like this and talking about it. Not every movie is worthy of a video essay. If you can call this a video essay, it's more like a video rambling. So hopefully I'll get out some more shorter videos in the future. My goal is to start making shorter videos that are easier to edit because editing just kills my soul. So thank you for watching. If you're still here, I guess I should put a disclaimer in there that you shouldn't watch this like in the open. I guess I should have put a disclaimer at the beginning that you should watch this with your headphones on. Thanks for watching.